Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to International Print Center New York, IPCNY, for this talk tonight, a conversation among artists Yoshua Close, Nantsikelelo Motiti, Karen J. Rivas, and Assembly Room. I am Jen Bradovich. I'm IPCNY's Exhibition and Curatorial Manager. I'm a white woman with brown hair in a bun and bangs, and I'm wearing a black button-down blouse. So if you are part of the IPCNY community, it's good to see you tonight. Thank you for sticking with us during this crazy year. Our Chelsea, New York space has been open this season with Living in America, an exhibition in 4 acts, curated by Assembly Room. If you're joining us for the first time and are new to IPCNY, we welcome you. Living in America is a group exhibition about the generative power of art in times of political and social crisis. And it's organized in 4 thematic acts like a play. Act 1, Outrage, and Act 2, Love, had previously been on view in the gallery. Then we had an intermission where we reinstalled the space with brand new works. We reopen tomorrow with Act 3, Hope, and Act 4, Care. You can book reservations to see the show now at ipcny.org/visit. Living in America is also presented online with a few additional works and texts. The first 2 acts are online now on our digital exhibition portal, ipcnyexhibitions.org/living-in-America. Acts 3 and 4 go live tomorrow. So this is our 3rd out of 4 online programs for Living in America. These are a series of conversations with artists from the show. Each of them ties in thematically with one of the exhibition's acts, and they're moderated by our curator's Assembly Room. If you've been watching our Zoom programs this fall, you know that I usually broadcast these talks from the gallery in front of work from the show. Tonight, I'm coming to you from my apartment. I'm currently in quarantine. So I just want to thank the flexibility and camaraderie of our curators, the IPCNY staff, our crew, our lenders, and most of all, our artists for pulling this together under some really challenging circumstances. Tonight's program has live captioning. You can turn it on with the CC button at the bottom of the screen. The talk will also be recorded and available online in about a week or so. Please use the Q&A box throughout the night to ask questions, and we'll take those at the end. We'll probably run to about 8:15 tonight. So I'll just welcome to join me on screen now our Living in America curators, Natasha Becker, Paula Gallio, and Yulia Topci, the founders of Assembly Room. Assembly Room is a curatorial collective that works to empower women identifying curators living and working in New York City and beyond, and strives to create a more global and diverse art ecosystem. Yulia will be leading our talk tonight. So Yulia, I'll hand it off to you for this conversation in conjunction with Living in America's 3rd act, themed Hope.
Thank you so much, Jen and IPCNY for introducing me, and thank you, my wonderful co-curators, Natasha Becker and Paula Gallio, for being here with me tonight and for also putting this exhibition together. And thank you for the participating artists, to all the participating artists, and especially to the artists that are on the panel tonight, Yoshua Close, Karen Rivas, and Nantsikelelo Motiti. Act 3, which is Act of Hope. Hope eliminates forgotten histories and imagines new futures. And as we move also to the Act 4, we consider care, which is an artistic practices that center care as acts of self-preservation and political action. And as we dealt with these first 2 acts in our presentation online and in person, we had witnessed artists expressing an outrage towards the political and social instability we have experienced in the last 4 years, and especially during this pandemic. With an act of love, our artists sought a radical shift in our society and addressed the concrete desire for inclusivity. Now, with the President-elect Biden and Kamala Harris, the first woman and the first woman of color being elected as a vice president, yay, which is a big win for all of us, we can all take a deep breath and inhale and slowly exhale and start envisioning a better future for America. I think of hope, especially of the current moment, as a much needed shift towards unity in this country. We must work together, building a more unified nation, embracing our differences, our backgrounds, and creating a more inclusive, sustainable, and equal society and nation. As I speak with all of you tonight, with panelists and with you audience, I want to point out that our panelists tonight come from very different backgrounds. And what unites them is their creativity, their practice as printmakers, their interest in revisiting their cultural and personal histories and reshaping it, their appreciation for Black culture and its people, and the care for their families, communities, and audiences in general. I hope that tonight we'll be able to get a, maybe a glimpse of how these artists are channeling their mediums, from making prints and collages in their studios in the small environments to expanding them to large murals and public projects on the streets, in institutions like IPCNY, or maybe non-traditional spaces like hair salons. And where the spaces allow them to celebrate Blackness and to see Black people larger than life and create spaces for them and live the spirits of these neighborhoods where their work is shown to public and encourage people to celebrate their past and inspire change. Fill the gaps and bring the conversations and interactions with the work, and most importantly, remind them that they matter. So tonight, I'm pleased to introduce the panelists. We will start with Yeshua Klaus, followed by Karen Revis, and we'll end the presentation with Nancy Kaleo Metiti. I will give a very short bios for each artist, and with the help of IPCNY, you will be able to see the extended bios in chat, I hope. And I want to point out that both Yeshua and Nancy Kaleo will present their work for the first time to public at IPCNY. So don't forget to book your time to see the works in person. And without the further ado, I'm here to introduce the artist. Yeshua Klaus is a Chicago-born artist, best known for his large-scale collage works, which address issues of identity, race, memory, and community. Influenced by his upbringing in Chicago's South Side, Klaus challenges the construction and conventions on African American identity. Yeshua finished his Master's of Fine Arts at Hunter College in New York in 2009 after studying his undergraduate degree in Northern Illinois University. And he has done many, many shows and is recipient of many fellowships, but just wanted to point out that his upcoming solo exhibition is scheduled to open at the Wellen Museum in February of 2022 in Clinton, upstate New York. Karen Revis is a New York-based New City artist, and her process is driven by materials. She explores making using monotypes, lithographs, etchings, linoleum cuts, calligraphs, and paper making. Two of her recent liner cuts prints have been selected by Colossal Media to be murals in New York City and Los Angeles, and we'll be able to see them today during Karen's presentation. She's a graduate of Pratt Institute, and she's a recipient of Robert Blackburn Workshop SIP Fellowship in 2018. And most importantly, her work can be seen as part of Act 1 and Act 2 still on IPCNY website, but her work in person can be seen at the Project Space Art Space in New York City. And finally, Nancy Kaleo Metiti is an artist from Zimbabwe, and she's also an art educator. She's invested in elevating the work and practices of Black people's past, present, and future through conceptual approach to design, experimental publishing, and archiving practices and peer-to-peer collaborations. She holds a diploma in multimedia art from the Zimbabwe Institute of Digital Arts and an MFA from the Yale School of Art with a concentration in graphic design. Natsikaleyo is currently an assistant professor in graphic design at Virginia Commonwealth University. She is also an artistic director for Black Chalk & Co., a platform for archiving and publishing practices that creates cultural events and fosters collaborative projects with peers located around the world. And the current project that Natsikaleyo will discuss is called Kudunurul Undoing, which is supported by Soros Art Fellowship grant and was commissioned inspired first by Stable in DC. So without further ado, I would like to give a virtual stage to our first presenter, Yeshua Klass.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. I think before I say anything, I just gotta say, this is like a rare opportunity where I'm a fan of everybody that's in this room. So this is so exciting for me. I'm Yeshua Klass. I'm an artist. I am Black, I'm biracial. I'm from the South Side of Chicago. I say these things because they're important to me. They inform the way that I see the world around me, and therefore they inform the way that I translate that world through my work. So the work that I have at IPCNY is a brand new piece, and it is coming from a new body of work that I'm exploring. You can see evidence of that in the work behind me. This is the mural that's headed towards the Welland Museum, upstate New York in 2022. And it's my first solo museum show. So super excited about that. And this is all woodblock printed. And it's sort of a tapestry. It's woodblock printed on muslin cloth, which is then attached to unstretched canvas. So the piece behind me is about 40 feet long and 15 feet high. And I can get a little bit closer to it in a moment to give you some details. I'm wondering if this is not a good time to show a video of process. There's no way to hide being Black in America. One has to, at some point, contend with and deal with social injustice and violence towards one's own body. So my first woodblock piece began a series of work I called the Banners series. I carved portraits of friends of mine from head to toe. I was really interested in scale and perspectives. While the figure is larger than the viewer at 8 feet tall, the vantage point that the viewer is looking at the figure is still from above the figure. So I'm interested in this tension here. And maybe that tension is about subjectivity. In the Eastern tradition, the main character is the landscape, and life happens inside of it. When I made diagram of how to hide in the wind, I was considering what element is important to my environment. Being raised on the south side of Chicago, we often talked about how the wind was a threat, the wind was dangerous. It was brutal, actually. And yet there was really no hiding from it. There was no way to escape that. I relate that idea of the wind as this ubiquitous threat to what I see daily as the threats upon Black bodies in America. The landscape and the figure are contending for visibility. We often live in an urban landscape that is threatening to render us invisible. So growing up, I think I was always aware that part of our identity construction was drawing from resources in the environment. So a lot of times in the work, you'll see figures that are made from these scraps. That's the language that I'm thinking of when I'm carving a wood block and printing that wood grain. How can I charge this figure with this identity that's made from the materials around it. I moved from making that banner series, then started using the woodblock prints as source material for collage. Now I'm using large blocks of wood again, but I'm printing them and using those as source material for a collage that's on a scale that I've never worked. I'm creating a large mural tapestry. It'll be about 40 feet long and 15 feet high. It references the Diego Rivera Detroit Industry mural, but I'm taking out the workers that he painted in, which were mostly white male workers, and I'm putting in the faces of my family members. Like many African American families, mine moved up from the South to the North for jobs in industry. The auto industry was, for Black folks, our access into the American dream. I'm interested in how that American dream has also disappointed us. It's also my personal attempt to bridge the gap of estrangement between my family and I. Because I didn't grow up with this family, we're all quickly trying to get to know one another. And that takes a lot of labor. That takes a lot of love. So all of these ideas are embedded in the mural and embedded in the carving that I'm doing, in all of the labor that I'm pouring into the wood blocks that I'm printing from. I'm certainly charged by an entirely new level of commitment and new inspiration. The inspiration this time is personal as well as political, of course. So while this is my family's story, this is also the story of America, and I'm just trying to put faces to that story.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get a little closer to the mural behind me. And as was mentioned in that video, this mural is based on Diego Rivera's Detroit Industry mural, which is at the DIA in Detroit. So my family landed in Detroit from Memphis in order to secure jobs there, and that has been intergenerational. So I'm doing portraits of family members in the mural, some of which have worked at the plant, some have not, but again, are simply located in the Midwest due to access to jobs at the plant. And this is all woodblock printed. So printing with the wooden kitchen spoon gives me the advantage of making these kind of gestural lines. You'll see a lot of images repeat, a lot of forms rather, repeating, like these wheel shapes. This is the advantage that woodblock printing gives me, so I can carve and print that one block as many times as needed in order to describe that machinery. Then there's also these kind of like flowers and wildlife that's sprawling through the factory as it's reclaiming it. You know, the auto industry is not the financial or economic source anymore of Detroit in the way that it was. So along with that abandonment comes reclaiming of the earth. So you see a lot of these flower forms emerging. Similar to the work that I have at IPCNY, I'm collaging. So woodblock printing onto fabric, and then that becomes the source material. We are deep behind the scenes here now. This is B-roll. I'm gonna actually get close to the sketch that I made of Diego's mural. So I've translated his original mural here into its most necessary compositional structure here. And you can see in the middle, there's that tree. sprouting through. So this Diego's mural is the compositional structure for my own family tree. The tree that's in the sketch may not make it into the final mural, but it's more of the idea of the trees and the plants that are sprawling through it.
Great, thank you, Yeshua. And the work that is featured at the IPCNY, The Mechanics of a Family Tree, can we take a look at it? Because there are also a lot of references that exist in the larger mural. Would it be possible to take a look at the work that is being commissioned by IPCNY? Thank you. And this figure that is tending to this kind of like a garden that could be coming from ruins, as we can see, you know, maybe a reference into Detroit also having this Renaissance moment. Is this someone you usually portray your friends or family members? Is this someone also a member of your family?
Yeah, Yulia, I got a little lag in audio, but this piece has similar elements to the mural behind me. So there is the flower element sprawling through. That's a portrait of my cousin, the cousin who actually has been really integral in reconnecting me to this side of my family.
Mm-hmm.
And below, not shown in this thumbnail, below the image, there is a reference to a car motor and some mechanics tools. So in some ways, it's kind of about the work and labor that she's doing, just in simply tying me back into the family tree. So she's putting in the work to generate this love and caring for this sprawling vine and wildflower here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Yeshua. Thank you. We will proceed with Karen next.
Okay, Yeshua, that was awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see? Yes, you can see in here? Okay, good. Okay, so Revisionary Prints is a brand, I guess you can say it's a brand of prints that I started to make about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe actually 5 years ago. I wanted to make work that I wanted to see more positive Black people in the world. And so I took it upon myself to take that on. It started with me making images of my family and my heroes, and it quickly became very political, which is actually kind of funny because I find that a lot of people think that if there is a Black person in work, it's political, but that's another conversation. So as it was mentioned earlier, Act 1, Outrage, you can see the 4 Afro pics on the back. That's my work, and you can see them a little better here. So this was one of the first images that I used. I was growing my hair out at the time, right before I made these images. And I bought an Afro pick, and I thought it was interesting that I was using this exact same image pick that I was using when I was a teenager. And that kind of tied into the idea that I had about revisionary prints, taking images that are old and repurposing them or using them as a jumping point to say something new. So I did a series of these Afro pics, and I also used this technique called paper litho, which you use a Xerox or inkjet print, and you use that as your plate, and you ink it up and you print from it. So these 4 are the pieces that were in the first act. This piece, I've used a lot of guns, unfortunately, in my work this year. It started from Trayvon Martin tracing the gun that was used when he was murdered. And this piece was made right after George Floyd died. Unfortunately, I've used this piece quite a bit, or rather this icon, the gun upside down and all around in my work, because it speaks to a lot of the events that have happened recently. And technically this is a monoprint and it's a lino cut over it. So I like to also kind of combine some of the printmaking techniques that I know and love. This piece is Small Riot. It's funny, I made a kaleidoscope of images of riots a couple of years back, and I pulled it out and started to use it earlier this year. And it's creeping back into my work quite a bit. I'm actually revisiting that now in a series of work that I'm doing. But as you can see, that image in the middle is of a riot scene of people yelling. And it's also, if you can see, it's on handmade paper. The blue part at the bottom is what you call pulp painting. So that's all aside from the image that's in the middle, everything else is done when the paper is wet and when you're actually making the paper. This is an image that I created earlier this year. I wanted to make images of Black young men that they had an innocence about them, and there was also a sense of pride about them, but I also wanted to protect them. So I used these African symbols behind the images that talked about protection. And this is one of the pieces that Colossal Media and I collaborated on putting up. I'm with an organization called the Black Artists and Design Guild, and this piece was picked to promote the Guild. So this is in New York, and it's down on the Lower East Side. You can see it there. They did a great job of this because this is a little different than the other image, but if you can see, like, the details in the back were fuzzy, and they really went in and did an amazing craftsmanship. They actually make these murals exactly like they did, I guess, in the Renaissance. So it's like the old school hand painted way of doing murals. And this is the second image. Again, this is a Black man and the symbols behind him, that which removes bad luck. And that was turned into a mural that's in LA. Again, it's promoting the Guild. And I'm also in a show, as Julia mentioned, right now at Project Art Space. And these are a few of the other images that are in the show. So you can see in the back, those are 2 guns. These pieces on the right are, it's interesting, people see them as targets, but when I was actually making the work, I was thinking about still protecting, like a force around a Black man protecting him. And that's it.
Thank you, Karen. Maybe we can see a short video of you making those 2 prints at the Robert Blackburn workshop.
Yeah, thank you. Crickety. Big Mama's crickety.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Yes. All right.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say it's so funny because Yashua uses a spoon, you know, to make his, and it's still pretty strenuous because I was explaining that I had to hold on to the paper so that it didn't shift, so that the image came out crisp. So that's it.
I just have a quick follow-up. This was your first time to translate these 2 prints into murals, right? What did it feel like to see these works realized in such a larger than life scale?
Well, it's funny because I do work pretty small because I am in a small studio. I live in a small place. Like, I really think about work that can be, you know, hung in a small place. And when the opportunity presented itself and I agreed to it, it just didn't hit me until I actually saw the piece. And, you know, I love it. And I don't even have words to say when I see this thing that I see, you know, he's on my wall here this big, and I see it huge. I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, and also you probably are thinking now that you're making more work, like, will it ever reach out the walls in the city?
Yeah, no, it's completely changed. I'm definitely thinking outside of the box now. I can think larger for sure. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you. I just wanted to remind our audience that to submit questions, whatever comes to your mind, we have a Q&A button, so feel free to ask artists, operators, or IPCNY anything you'd like, and we'll address these questions at the end. And again, thank you, Karen. That was a wonderful presentation. And now we'll move to Nancy Kalila to talk about her practice and her work.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. And just like Yashua, it's wonderful to be on a panel with so many people that I admire. Yashua is an old colleague and really wonderful supporter from my days in New York. And I have so much respect for the practice. I visited the studio yesterday, and I'm just so thrilled with this new piece about family reconnection and really thinking about labor, Black labor, also acknowledging all of the ways we've moved through spaces as a story of resilience and also sacrifice. Karen, really, you know, there's nothing I love to see more than a Black woman on press, thinking about how images of us are captured over and over again, having the opportunity to be at the, you know, have your hands on the wheel and selecting what images to reproduce, what to push out, being at that position of power. I'm always excited to see more and more Black women on press and in printmaking, us printing being a way to distribute images to a broader community. I really believe in that modality. So I'm going to share my screen and just talk about this investigation that really kind of took me in when I arrived in the US. My work really comes out of the reality of being displaced, looking for kin. It's not a sad narrative. It's a very hopeful and triumphant narrative. It acknowledges all these kinds of connections that exist. When I found the African Hair Braiding Salon in Harlem, I was so taken aback to find these spaces that were reproduced from back home, almost airlifted. And that has inspired me to know and to think through aesthetics, Black labor, Black genius, the mathematical tendency within our cultural production, knowledge production and exchange between people as we work, the tending to the body, community care, all of these kinds of things are so, so important and have played a big role in me thinking through my place in the US as an African immigrant. Entering into the space as a graphic designer, I also think about the way the hair braiding salon is a metaphor for my practice. It's client-based. It is also building relationships, is producing something, thinking about a desire that is presented, and then using my expertise to fulfill, recommending, it's a kind of really wonderful. I think I really admire what happens in the braiding salon because of that space of sharing, intergenerational exchange, also just a holding space, and just a real tending to beauty, a space dedicated to beauty and the importance of that. Right now I'm in Brooklyn in Bed-Stuy, and I walked up Fulton Street. It's one of my favorite walks to take, and I saw all the braiding salons still there. I was a little bit worried not having lived in this area for now. I live in Richmond, Virginia now. So another kind of idea around navigation, Black bodies moving, kind of going to that site and living there for a while, this space where Black Africans came to years ago. We commemorated 1619 last summer. It was the last summer, the summer before. And I think a lot about myself as a Black African woman living there, and what my work is and what I'm learning and what that experience is. So this piece, in process, this is me in the gallery last night, tending to the wall, braiding the wall, thinking about home, thinking about loss, and also what I am recovering for myself, which is language. Language is something that people who move to another space often have to shift, something that they lose. Also, they accumulate new vocabularies, they add vocabulary to themselves, or they learn, they pick up language that is being spoken around them. We need to communicate. We also understand and learn the different codifications. I'm thinking a lot these days about dimension, the dimension of the Black experience. There's a lot around us that kind of flattens us, so especially the naming of us sort of flattens us into categories, or takes away our specificity, or calls us things that degrade who we are, make us think less of, less of ourselves as lesser. And also the lack of language that is assigned to the work that we do in graphic design. There is no developed vocabulary that brings Black aesthetics, Black cultural production into the space of the Academy for Investigation for Study, where is a conversation about technology in relationship to Black aesthetics, attending to the idea of mathematics, engineering, physics, that is related to all the things that we do, basket weaving, building. Where is the language in architecture that acknowledges the Black technologies that were learned, and Black expertise that were taken when slavery happened, all the farming and all these things. I think about that when I'm making my work. As much as I'm using my hands, and I hope you don't mind me going back and forth, I'm not a very linear thinker. When I'm using my hands, I'm thinking about these kinds of tasks, building, constructing, growing, farming. I'm thinking about measuring, and I'm thinking about time and labor. As much as I love using my hands, I think a lot with my hands and create work using all these various components, piecing them together. I think about repetition and pattern. I'm also thinking, about all of these different tools that we could bring into the work, or the evolution of tools. I collect combs. I think about how a comb is a very simple object that produces a lot of different kinds of hairstyles, one simple thing. And so, and using the same repetitive action, it produces an infinite library of aesthetics. And so I think a lot in terms of tools and modules and how to use them with repetition and create a lot of different kinds of things. I think very iteratively, I think hairdressers are doing that too. I forgot to say I am a Black woman from Zimbabwe. I have box braids in my hair. They are purple and pink. They have a gradation from dark to light. And I'm wearing lipstick that kind of is a combination of those colors. I think about braiding my own hair as part of my practice, part of my research practice. It's an embodied practice, you know, learning how to braid from all those women on YouTube. That level of community care, resource building is so important. This is my second time doing box braids. Think about learning how to do that work in the same way that I learned how to use a CNC router, how to use a 3D printer, how to use a vinyl cutter. And I use those tools in a range of ways to produce work. What we're seeing here are different alphabets, you know, because I'm also thinking about language modules that produce language and sort of letter form as a module for understanding and naming and all these things. At the moment, I've been working on some screen printed posters, you know, on top of this collage that I rendered a number of years ago when I was really thinking about how missing that density of Black bodies, especially Black women, that chatter, that particular side eye, you know, the particular kind of tonalities, and also a level of safety, protection. I just needed to make this collage for myself. You know, sometimes I am making work and people ask me who the audience is. I'm the audience for my work. I'm the primary audience for my work. And I am very glad that other people can see themselves in the work or access something in the work. But there's definitely a kind of insider motivation and a very personal motivation behind the work, and sharing that with others by producing editions, producing prints and multiples, also producing them at a kind of lower cost, I think was a very important part of my practice. I often present my work with the tools that are used to produce the work and the tools that inspire the work. I don't think an inspiration for me. I love the constellation of elements in the hair salon. You see all the different things, the magazines, the people who are being worked on as the surface. You see the finished hairstyles, you see the wigs, you see all the patterned fabric that women are wearing, you see all the combs and the jars. I also think it's interesting to be in a space where everything is where it needs to be because of its use value and how people move and convenience. Working in this way, like thinking about constellations of objects, I often think about that. What can the Afrocomb bring to the wood block that's been cut on the CNC router? How do they speak to each other? How they kin? You know, I love to marry all these different things in my home, objects that I wear, that I've bought to wear as garments and things like that, are objects that I also use to decorate the space. And, you know, I kind of allow things to be interchangeable. What is a work? What is a utilitarian object? Just like these sculptures here. And then, you know, I'm not going to go on for much longer, but just thinking about the word kududunura, which means to undo. So kududunura, you know, you can even hear that sound like pulling at a thread, pulling at a sweater. It means to undo, knitting, to undo hair. What does it mean to present work that has the ability to come back together, or what does it mean to take things apart? For myself as an immigrant, I'm in a constant process of reshaping, reforming, undoing, unlearning, adding, subtracting, recovering, combining, binding, solidifying. And so as I'm making publication, I think through that. As I'm making posters, I think about that, about multiple things coming together, like people need to come together, things, a wall for protection, a wall to keep things safe, or just, you know, a sense of presence and belonging at the limits of a space or crossing a boundary. and this ability to tile and something being a discrete element, and also being able to be combined to make a form a larger entity. It's kind of what these kind of things keep me going. And maybe this is the last slide I'll show. The work you first saw, that the mural that says "Aha," which is really the beginning of a mural project. It's a long laugh that will stretch across multiple cities. The mural will be mounted in Zimbabwe, in the Bahamas, in Cape Town, in formal exhibition spaces, in hairdressing salons, in neighborhoods, really thinking about bringing this kind of these sounds that we kind of lose or forget or echo through spaces when we're together, about how my communities connect, and thinking about the kinds of things that I can only do with certain people. There's a folder on my, well, not a folder, but a document, a Word document on my computer that's called Things I Share Only With You. And things like a hair comb that I would only share with my siblings were the initial inspiration for this investigation, along with the hair braiding, the visits to the hair braiders, and the hair braider business cards that I collected over time. And yeah, I think that's what I can share. I don't need a conclusion, because for me, my work is open-ended and iterative, and it's an ongoing conversation.
Thank you so much, Nontsikelelo. And what I love about your work, how, with all this braiding and letters and the symbolism, how you can actually create different realities each time. So, playing with words, playing with sounds, and it really depends on your mood and what emotions you experience, and what feelings you have to kind of go with the flow. It's wonderful. And as you all presented, I found a very common theme of like celebration and kind of commenting on labor, going back to the original mural by Diego Rivera that was a celebration of workers, celebration of working class, Detroit, machinery building, in Yashua, breaking those down and celebrating his family history, his, and also labor in the actual woodcut print with his hands and translating into this beautiful mural to the larger scale. And then with Karen also using her physical labor and making from prints to this larger than scale people that don't really belong to all of us, right? Belong to the streets, to the neighborhoods. And Nontsikelelo, I think that in your braiding project, there's also labor that is expressed just even in making hair, like using the oils and braiding it, and then working with your communities and expressing love and care for your immediate community and taking to the next level. So I love that connection among you, and I love the celebration of your communities and your families and your work and your countries as well. With Nontsikelelo case, I'm also wondering, I will probably start this discussion when it relates to pandemic and being alone for so long and kind of dealing with this existential crisis. I wonder how your projects have changed, this particular project individually for all of you. And maybe I'll start with you, Nontsikelelo, because especially that you worked with hair salons, where communities are closely together, how you consider in this project and the idea of actually making murals outside, making murals on a bigger scale. It could be a solution, right? And the pandemic kind of allowed for that to happen. I wonder what you would think about that.
Totally. So I've always wanted to make large works that cover surfaces, and at this moment, I think cultural institutions are really looking to see what programming can look like outside. The wall has always been a normative space for presenting works. It's quite convenient. I would really like to do something that's actually on the floor. I used to do a lot of floor tiles. I'd love to do a piece on the road. But going back to the idea of the salon, I find myself in a position where I'm talking to so many people right now. I have so much access, but I always have as an immigrant. I'm always using the screen to connect with other people. But really seeing an opportunity now to do even more work collaboratively with people that might not be in the same space with myself. I can see one of my wonderful collaborators, Ray Carlson, who helped me refine the letter forms. I think we've got maybe up to 8 variations. I can't even pull all of them out. There's so much work that we've done together over the year. I feel like I'm running a hair salon. I feel like I've got a space with all of these amazing hairdressers, and they've got all of these ideas and expertise, and I'm involved in curating the project or pulling clients in, and then they're supporting, making, refining, having conversations with me. I think that way of working is quite powerful. There's so much teaching and learning and exchange that's happening, and we're not in the same space at all. I really believe in teams of people, and I guess because as an immigrant, I've always had to find ways to keep connected to people that I value and that are integral to my life and work. What's happening now is allowing me to pull in people that seem geographically closer, but pulling them like directly into the work, like into like the deeper parts of the work, and they're not so peripheral anymore. There's also a different kind of texture to what it means to work together now. There's more attending. There's more kind of really kind of checking in. How are you doing? Acknowledgement of what's happening around us contextually. And as a graphic designer, we're kind of the ones that the finger's always on us for deadline. It's a hard time to fulfill deadlines. Our work is always on the screen. It's a hard time to always work on the screen and also communicate. So for me, I'm enjoying just like people being more personable and really just expressing more care as they work together.
Okay, thank you. Yeshua, has the pandemic also allowed you to think, take time, maybe work on your mural more?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, it's definitely expanded time. I think the main shift that the pandemic's offered me, though, is I had planned on being in Detroit and getting portraits of my family members directly, staging photos with them and using those as the portraits for the mural. I could not travel during the pandemic, obviously. So I began to grab images off of their Facebook profiles. And at first I felt a bit resistant about that, but then really accepted that limitation as part of the strength of the work. I've been reconnected to this family through Facebook. So it kind of only seemed right to return to that technology. I mean, I think we're all using technology to bridge the gaps nowadays. This platform of Zoom is, clearly an example of that. But that's been for me the main shift. Of course, time has expanded, but and using Facebook as a way to get portraits done has been really interesting.
Great. And while I have you here, I'm also going to bring up questions as well. Really quickly, specifically question for you from Jennifer. How do you plan such a large collage and print in pieces that fit so perfectly together?
Yeah, so I started with a sketch, and from that sketch, I planned out the essential elements that were in the mural. So again, behind me, this wheel and this wheel are printed from the same block. These 2 cylinders are also carved and printed from the same one block. So I was able to kind of find the essential elements that were in the overall collage, and then make note of how many times I would have to print each element in order to rebuild a more complex environment.
Thank you, Yeshua. Karen, just going back to my original question, if you remember, if being in the studio alone and working during the pandemic, we've already kind of touched on this, how it changed your practice. But would you like to expand more on that? And also there's a question for you. Maybe you can also touch on it from an attendee. Thank you for sharing. I wonder what you think of the importance of working on the subject of hair for the Black community is. And this is also a question for Nancy Kaleo. And what role does it play? I have found it a bit sensitive and would love to learn more.
Interesting, sensitive. When I think of the defining characteristics of being Black, hair is one of the first things that comes out. And then being a Black woman and Black hair, I've been very aware of my hair since I was aware of me. I don't find it, I find it kind of a celebration the way that I'm portraying it. And it's funny, the Afro pick, that is such a sense of pride. Growing up, that was something that was a celebratory, it was a way to decorate, your hair and still say something very prideful about yourself. So I don't know how to answer. I feel like it's just what I think about, and I'm working in a vein that's talking about things, that I'm thinking about. I wanted to go back to a question that you said earlier too about the mural, about, how I felt. And one thing I definitely wanted to say is so many people have responded to it in a way that they don't respond to my other work, or they do, but it's just, it really feels like it's of the people, it's out there for everybody to see, and it belongs to everybody who walks by. And I'm so surprised at how many times I get tagged on Instagram with people taking photos in front of it. That has been, amazing. So answer that question.
That's wonderful. And you go ahead before I have a lot.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was going to also say that the beauty of these murals that anybody can see them anytime and not worry about, social distancing or making appointments at CNY. And, this is all available to public, and it's kind of like people look forward to see them and strike a conversation. So I think it's wonderful. It's a solution to working, during the pandemic. Make me a mural, maybe.
Yeah. One of the things too, when I made Revisionary Prints, was I wanted to make work that was affordable, or at least accessible, in some ways, because work in galleries just isn't for a lot of people. And I never thought about a mural, people owning that as well. So that was a plus.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And Nancy, would you like to comment on the question that was also addressed to you regarding the hair culture of the African diaspora?
I definitely think about the connection to home, but when I started this investigation, but some of the concerns are technical concerns as well. It's about production processes. It's about it's about art making. It's about cultural production, and it's a question around value and what is valued and what is seen as technology and not. It's also me playing between forms. It's like me being a little bit transgressive. It's me, just exploring and experimenting. It's me thinking about pattern and repetition. Oftentimes we will talk about Black cultural practices and objects and assign them as symbolic, as cultural, as ritual. All those things are very important. They're very important. But then we don't allow for the other conversations about technique. What is it about that thing that makes it a hallowed object, that it has that aura? There is somebody who understands, the visual understands perception, what to do with the frequency of the lines, what to do with the thickness of the band and the space in between, what to do to cheat dimension, what to do to make people feel mesmerized, what to do to make something come forward and sit back. You know, we're not talking about all of those things when we talk about or teach about. I see someone's comment about when you teach about these cultural practices. Those things are not happening in our schools, not even back home in Zimbabwe. And we are so sophisticated, even in our contemporary manifestations, because I don't want to trap us in a traditional lens, you know. We are so sophisticated, you know, I'm very sophisticated with my hair braiding. This is high technique happening. This is high technique happening in those salons in Harlem and Detroit and London. All these braiders are all over the world, you know. It's also resilience, and it's also kind of it's a whole economic structure. There's so much there. So I'm not necessarily thinking about, you know, just like traditional practices and you know, preservation. I'm actually thinking about I'm thinking a lot more about technology and the contemporary, what these signifiers mean to us as people living now. What does the motif mean? And the motif of braiding exists actually across many cultures. You know, I look at a lot of Celtic designs. I think they're phenomenal. Native American hair, you know, there's braiding, Victorian hairstyles, there's braiding. Braiding is something that pulls strands together to make a cord stronger, you know. And for me, I think a lot more about that. And I think about my work and my whole practice as that, bringing multiple strands, modalities, knowledge streams together. And what I presented today is just like one version of the manifestation. So, and then using that motif, because I think that is the braid is such a powerful, recognizable motif. It's a way to connect to people. It announces who the community, you know, the community is speaking to. It's kind of speaking in a vernacular. And I think my work is probably more about that, is investigating all of those things I spoke about, but connecting to a community that I'm akin with, using a known codified language and textuality.
A question for you though. It's interesting. I'm wondering what your experience was growing up, because I say that this is a celebration of hair, but I was just telling a friend the other day that I remember being about maybe 8 years old and going to a salon and having a book, and I wanted to have Farrah Fawcett's hair, and the beautician was going to give me, you know, okay, that's what you want. Okay, I'm going to do this. And then at the end, I was in tears because clearly my hair did not look like Farrah Fawcett's hair. And so now, you know, I don't think this new generation understands that, and that is a huge celebration. And I'm wondering, you know, you had braids, and did you grow up with braids? Did you ever like perm your hair? Was there ever a problem?
You know, when I think about Black hair aesthetics, we connected to an ideal that was an image of Black America. We were looking for a version of Blackness that seemed to be more valuable than ourselves in Africa, having just recently been, you know, became independent. Our nation became independent 2 years before I was born. So 1980, Zimbabwe is independent. So it's not so long ago that we were still kind of really suffering under that kind of colonial kind of hammer. And so, you know, always looking to a version of ourselves. And I find, you know, that's the same kind of conversation in the Black is Beautiful movement, this kind of looking out for another version of Blackness that feels like it can edify you, you know, that you can hold on to. And so when we were straightening out, and I only probably straightened my hair once, it was to look like, I actually I learned to draw portraits from copying images from Black Hair magazine. So there's a zine that I made for the African Hair Braiding Salon Reader, which has an image of Jade. Those were the people I was drawing, Nia Long, Gabriella Union in the early days. You know, we were looking at that. When I came to the US, you know, going to the braiding salon was actually me going to the barber, because I was like unapologetic tomboy growing up. I mean, there's just like particular ideas around gender. And here is a space that where gender kind of presentation is policed a lot in my community. And so as a kind of rebellious individual, kind of always keeping my hair short, shaving my head was important to me. My mother also was very busy. She didn't have time to comb all her kids' hair. So we always had very short hair going to school. It was out of utility. But I've never had that kind of struggle with thinking about kind of a white standard of beauty. We're always looking towards other Black communities, Black Caribbean, patra braids down to your backside, you know? That's what that's what our ideal was, watching poetic justice, you know? And if you go into the hair salon, the people will be, you go in and you say you want poetic justice braids. At one time, there was a hairstyle called Rihanna 1, another one called Rihanna 2, Rihanna 3, different. So it's looking for that mirror, another image of that is valuable, that kind of looks like you, to kind of bring that to yourself. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It's wonderful. I think we're getting closer to the end, and I just would like to ask maybe everyone, there's a great question that was on my mind, but starting with Yeshua and see how much we have time to wrap it up. There's a question from audience. Now that the election result now that we know the election result, does any one of you think your roles as artists changed? What is the most important next step for you, for the art world, and for people who appreciate art? So that's a big question, or maybe my follow-up would be, what do you hope for? Yeshua?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that my role as an artist changes, but I think I think that I'm noticing in myself, I'm becoming a bit more active politically. I'm becoming much more aware, and some of that, of course, is filtering into the artwork, into the studio. But I'm also doing a lot more work outside the studio as a result of that. I have a feeling I'm not the only one, though. I think this is like, you know, the highest voter turnout since 100 years or something. So we're seeing an awakening. I think so. I think it's a merger of a lot of problem areas with the coronavirus and many other things being exposed during this time. So we're realizing how vulnerable and desperate we are for change. And I think now, as far as the election result, now is the time to really get to work and hold the people accountable, and to hold ourselves accountable as well. I know it's a bit abstract. I don't have anything more specific than that, but I'm just ready to go to work and to really, you know, continue these conversations, really put pressure on the people in power.
Can I say something to that as well?
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier that I was working on these images of riots. And it started to shift for me a little bit. And I thought maybe that work isn't going to be as relative. And then I'm like, wait, what am I even thinking? It's not like the world just changed all of a sudden. It's, you know, I just feel like a little more hopeful, but I do still feel like a lot of the things that I'm dealing with in my work, it's as important now to keep the conversations going. So I'm going to continue with my riot work, because I'm sure that it's not going to be roses and unicorns and everything starting in January. We still have so much work to do.
Thank you, Karen.
I'm thinking a lot about beauty. I'm thinking a lot about the utilitarian role of beauty, the power of it. I started producing posters during the, you know, just after the first like very harsh lockdown. And that was a remedy for me, for myself, you know, making those images. And also I was really wanting to produce work to go out to people, for them to have something hopeful, to hold on to something positive, something uplifting. And so I really feel for myself, that is what I tapped into a lot this summer. I'm a very outspoken person. I've got a very clear stance on things. I come from a place where we've gone through a severe political crisis, and it comes from a crisis of a silent community. Being in the US and seeing a nation being within the boundaries of a nation that where the kind of promise of freedom of speech is supposed to be a given, and seeing what happened over the summer, where basic civic action was squashed so violently, just in my backyard, literally in Richmond, Virginia, was quite shocking. The things I only saw back home. I think my role is to continue to connect the communities that I have access to. I think this mural project is one of those interventions. We have so much more to learn from ourselves. America, as a superpower, needs to learn from all the other nations that it's been kind of helping or looking at and seeing the crisis and labeling them. There's so much that we know from as Zimbabweans about crisis and sacrifice and struggle and banding together, even when leadership is not on our side. So there was a supposedly favorable result, but the work is really about what we do as community, and holding each other accountable, not just people about, because power, there's gradations of power. Power is operating at every level. We're part of the power structure. So yeah, I'm kind of trying to own my space, thinking about somebody who really wants to, use beauty to do powerful, sharp things. I don't think beauty is all about pretty. I think beauty can be sharp, can be dynamic. It can be a truth-telling thing. It can be something to give comfort, something to keep us holding on. But also, I really just want to keep my closest peers accountable. It's been really encouraging seeing the work Joshua has been doing, just like out in the street with like the wide awakes and things like that. So seeing what other colleagues are doing, that's really wonderful. Acknowledging ourselves as citizens as well as makers and oracles. So yeah, for me, that's it.
Thank you all. Let's just continue our work together. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. And I'll just give a floor to Jen. It was just an honor speaking with you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Thank you for framing these artist practices this way, like you have tonight. One thing that strikes me about it is like the power of scale and space in all of these projects. There's a visceral response when you encounter work this way. And so it's interesting to hear the ways that each of you have, worked with this, interrogated this, negotiated this. And Nontsikelelo, you mentioned this sort of ability to make people feel mesmerized. And I think when you're dealing with a wall and the scale and the space of mural or a large work, you have a real space to do that. And so I just thank you all for being here tonight. Karen, I believe we can see the mural at Houston and Eldridge. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Wonderful.
Awesome. So everyone go down to Lower East Side, I think, and see that.
And if you're in LA, in Silver Lake.
And in Silver Lake, if you're in LA. And Joshua, thank you. We're so delighted to be part of this larger project that you're working on. We look forward to the Welland show. And Nontsikelelo, I texted you this, but I had such a visceral reaction, like I said, seeing a photograph of the mural in the space, and I can't wait to see it in person. So thank you for coming up from Virginia. Thanks for being here. And thank you, Assembly Room, for putting together Living in America for us for IPCNY. That's a wrap tonight. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Really wonderful.
You can visit ipcny.org to make your appointments to see Living in America. You can also see Living in America online at ipcnyexhibitions.org/Living in America. Acts 3 and 4 will be online at some point tomorrow whenever I finish putting them up. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at IPCNY. Follow Assembly Room at Assembly Room NYC, and please do search for and follow all of these fabulous artists here tonight. Thanks for being here, everybody. There's a quick survey at the end. If you can just answer 2 quick questions, it makes our programming better. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank
Everyone.
you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.